Welcome back, guys, or if you're new to my channel, this is Automotive Anonymous, and that's a 2025 Subaru Outback Wilderness, the last year of this generation. This one's about $44,000, and it is in the infamous geyser blue color, and that's my RAV4 Hybrid. It's an SE. It's about a $38,000 vehicle, but these have a lot more in common than you might think. A lot of people cross-shop these, although the Outback is a mid-size crossover, and the RAV4 is a compact crossover. These are two very valuable vehicles to a lot of people. They do things similarly, but quite a bit differently as well. And I have owned an Outback Wilderness, and I owned it for over 3 years. It's the longest I've ever kept a vehicle. That's because it was so dang good, if I'm being honest with you guys. But currently I own this, a RAV4. So today I'm extremely excited to bring you this side-by-side comparison and talk about the ownership experience to help you guys at home decide which one might be the right vehicle for you and your family. So if you get anything out of this video today, please consider liking it. Comment your thoughts and opinions below, subscribe if you haven't already, and check out the Twin Falls Subaru, one of the best Subaru dealerships in the nation. They sell below MSRP, they ship all over the country, and with that said, let's get right into this side-by-side comparison. But before we get too far into the nitty-gritty differences between these vehicles, going through them side by side, we need to talk about where they came from, where they're going, what do they have in common, and why did I sell my Outback after 3 years for this RAV4 while still believing that it might be a better value, it might be a better vehicle in most regards for most people. There's a lot that we're going to talk about throughout this video, but first of all, let's get through the big points. These are both the top safety pick plus rating. They're fantastic. They're designed by two of the best Japanese automakers, which are two of the best automakers, period, of any generation. The Outback, it's been around since 2020. It's in its last year. The Wilderness is the most off-road capable version, and it is a fantastic bargain. Personally, I would not have bought an Outback if it wasn't for the Wilderness trim level, but when I saw it, I just kind of had to have it. And the RAV4, also being a top safety pick, also having a lot of the same safety features, but it does not do safety features quite as well as the Subaru. After owning both, I can say the adaptive cruise control, the lane keep assist, and some of those features are better on the Subaru, but it's not bad. It still holds its own, it does a good job, and it has a lot of things built into it. But more importantly, these are both very structurally safe. They're going to protect you guys in an accident, which I hope you're never a part of. But there's a lot of reasons to consider a Japanese automaker. There's a lot of reasons to consider one of these two vehicles. And while this video is less about the specific trim levels in front of you and more about these vehicles as a whole, about their platforms, there are a few other details that we need to go over. Both of these basically have the same price range. A base model of either of these is about $30,000, and they can get up to about $45,000. This is about as loaded out as a Subaru Outback can be, this one being about $44,000, compared to my SE Hybrid, which is not the highest trim level, and it's not the most loaded one, and it's about $38,000. But after owning my Outback for 3 years, and then selling it with 44,000 miles, it lost about $16,000 or $15,000 of value. So if you guys are short-term car owners like I am and you sell every couple of years, this might not be the best one for you because you might be losing about $5,000 of monetary value every single year. Although there are going to be some positive trade-offs to that, getting to drive this vehicle compared to the RAV4. But when I was KBBing my RAV4 the other day, giving it about a 3-year and about the same mileage example, it lost about an average of $3,000 a year. So this is going to hold its value better. If you're going to keep them long-term, 10 plus years, I don't think it's ultimately going to matter, but that is a factor that could influence your buying decision. This Outback, it has a 2.4-liter turbo engine, makes 260 horse, 277 torque, but the way that this works with the TR690 transmission, the CVT, it is such an efficient platform that it feels and competes more like a 300 horsepower vehicle. Mine in testing could do a low 6 seconds 0 to 60, even at altitude. And they're honestly pretty easy to work on. Your reservoirs, your filters, your fuse boxes, everything is on the periphery. For being a unibody vehicle, just like the RAV4, which these are both basically sedan type platforms turned into an SUV, technically the Outback literally is a sedan, the Legacy. And this is basically a sedan without the sedan as the starting point. This is longitudinally mounted. That means just like a truck, you have the serpentine belt on the front, easy to get to, your alternator, your AC compressor. Just a lot of maintenance items are very easy on this. But if you do opt for the non-turbo engine, it looks the exact same under the hood, minus the intercooler, and then a different intake manifold scheme. So it's going to be easy to work on as well. Meanwhile, these If you have the non-hybrid RAV4, it actually outdoes the non-hybrid Outback by about 20 horsepower. Those have 182 horsepower and 176 pound-feet of torque. The non-hybrid has 201 horsepower, but a little bit less torque at 163. But mine is a hybrid. You can tell because it has the orange cable and the motor in the back, making this the all-wheel drive system. So this is a little bit different than the same engine equivalent that's in the non-hybrid. This makes 219 combined horsepower and a non-disclosed torque figure. It also doesn't have a serpentine belt. It doesn't have an alternator. It doesn't have a starter. And it has an electronic AC compressor, but still a conventional heating way with the coolant for how it warms up the cabin. And then periphery, you see the fuse box, you see the reservoirs. You don't have a top mount oil filter like you do on the Subaru, but still you can't complain too much. And this also has a CVT, but it is an electronically controlled one. And they seem to be much more reliable than you get on basically any other CVT. I do think that Subaru has basically perfected it. In my 44,000 miles and owning a few other Subarus, I have never had even a single hiccup from any of them. But it seems to be that the eCVT with the hybrid Toyotas is probably the most reliable transmission by any automaker currently made. There are people with 450,000 miles on theirs who have never even changed the transmission fluid, and yet they're holding up, driving perfectly well like the day they bought them. But while these two vehicles have a very good powertrain and the better of the powertrain options for each of the models, the Outback is the much more off-road capable one. It has 9.5 inches of ground clearance, and even the regular non-wilderness has 8.7 compared to the RAV4 that has about 8.1. The Subaru has symmetrical all-wheel drive. It has a full-time drive shaft rotating, powering the rear, putting about half the power back there. Meanwhile, the Toyota, while driving better in snow and rain than I expected it to in my testing already, it has an electric motor that makes about 50 horsepower, and that's how you power the rear. So it's not kind of a preventative system. It's going to kick in after the fact, after you're already slipping. And in my winter driving, which I have probably about a half dozen Subaru winter driving videos from last year that you guys can look for back then, the Toyota, it does a good job, but it is noticeably not as good. It spins a lot more. And I have yet to try it in snow with the tires that the Outback is wearing, because mine also has Yokohama Geolanders. I added these a little while ago. They have around 11/32 of tread depth. The sizing is slightly different compared to the white-walled tire that the Wilderness has. That's a 225/65/17, and mine is a 225/60/18. But dang, does the Yokohama Geolander look good? It's Snowflake Mountain Peak rated, so it is decent enough in severe weather. And honestly, these vehicles look really good. But you can see that the side skirt is tucked up a little bit higher on the Subaru than it is on the RAV4. These are the keys for each of the vehicles, and I do have to say that the Toyota key does fit in your pocket just a little bit better. It's not quite as wide as the Subaru, but I need you guys to trust me that I'm going to push the power liftgate buttons at the same time, and we're going to go over to which one opens up first in 3, 2, 1. Man, I think the Subaru beat it, so we're going to head over there first. Back here, this is a mid-size crossover, so you'd expect a ton of room, and it does do pretty well. That is about 33 cubic feet, and it has a lot of black plastic rubber mats on this package. It also has a hitch back here, which, if you guys are wondering, the payload on both of these vehicles is 900 pounds, so you can hold 900 pounds worth of people or stuff wherever you want to place that in the vehicle. Of course, more spread out is better, but that also includes the roof rails, which the Outback has the raised roof rails, and the RAV4 has the lowered sporty ones. But this can tow 3,500 pounds. Meanwhile, a non-hybrid RAV4 can tow only 1,500 pounds, and a hybrid can tow 1,750. And the base Outback, that's not the turbo, can still tow 2,700 pounds. So even the base engine in this can now tow the hybrid of that by 1,000 pounds. But when you drop the seat switch, you have these fancy handles, which make it a pretty easy process. You have about 75 cubic feet. They lay nearly flat, so you can easily car camp in this, because this vehicle is 16 feet long. That vehicle is about 15 feet long. So that is the classification difference between a mid-size and a compact crossover, basically, because otherwise the width is about the same, the height is about the same. They're roughly 6 feet wide, 5.5 feet tall, and they both weigh in the upper 3,000 pound range. That's probably about 3,900 pounds. That's probably about 3,700 pounds. But both of these have a really nice back cargo area, a lot of extra little add-ons, even a subwoofer on this one. which is part of the reason why this one is spec'd to be about $44,000. Meanwhile, my RAV4 actually has 37 cubic feet of room, which it really doesn't look like it's, any bigger than the Outback. I'm assuming that's just how all the cutouts work. That's how the cutouts on the hatch work, which the hatch on both of these open to about the same height. So if your garage isn't very high, or if you're gonna have to park close to the garage door, just be watchful of that. But when you do drop the seats, you have about 70 cubic feet. So you are gonna be about 5 cubic feet less than the Outback. But overall, they're both very, very efficient in how they hold their storage. This has a temporary spare tire. That has a full-size spare tire, which I really appreciate. But you guys are going to start to notice some differences when it comes to miles per gallon based off of the powertrains that you guys saw and the all-wheel drive systems. The Outback, it's about 2 seconds or at least a second faster 0 to 60 depending on the density altitude per day on testing, doing in the 6s versus doing in the 7s to the 8s on the RAV4. It also has a more competent mechanical all-wheel drive system that you can depend on just a little bit more, and from the factory it comes with a more aggressive tire. But because of all that, this thing is only rated for 21 in the city, 26 on the highway, which is probably about what a lot of owners get, sometimes worse. When I owned one, I do a lot of 55 to 80 mile per hour driving. When I'm at the interstate speed, it gets like 22 to 20, maybe sometimes 24 on a fantastic day. But on a day going about 60, I have gone well into the low 30s on a full tank of gas. So it's going to be really dependent on road conditions, wind conditions, and speed. But this turbo boxer engine can be fantastically efficient. It has an 18.5 gallon tank. When you close the gas door, which it only needs 87 octane, which is fantastic that it's just mid-grade, and you lock the vehicle, the gas door locks, so no bums are going to be siphoning any of your 87 octane fuel. And the RAV4 also has a locking gas cap for its 14.5 gallons of regular 87 octane, but it has a button to pop the gas door from inside by the driver footwell. But because I don't have to fill this up very often, and I've only had this vehicle for maybe a month and a half or something, I often forget. I get out of the car, I try to fill up, and I totally forget that there is a button to push because I only fill up less than once a week. But this thing is rated for 41 city, 30 on the highway. Now that the weather is in the 20s, now that I have all-terrain tires, I have noticed I get about 28 to 34 going 80 miles per hour. But if I go highway speeds like 55, 60, this thing can still get into the 40s. If I'm driving around town and it's an efficient trip, I can get into the 40s. If it's a not efficient trip, there's a lot of warming up time because of the cold. It is in the low 30s. So it's going to be interesting to see how MPG is in the fall with this vehicle. But the Subarus in perfect conditions are more than the EPA rates them, and in worse conditions, it can be less. But it's time to finally hop into the interior, talk about a few other things, and then we'll wrap up this video. The Outback, it has a lot of black plastic cladding, a lot of black accents, and I think it looks fantastic. I think if you guys are really wanting a wagon and you're concerned that the renderings or the camo photos of the new generation is not going to look like a wagon like this, I highly recommend you at least go to the dealership, test drive one, check one out for yourself, because this is a very good vehicle. I like how they look. I like all the things that they offer. Sure, they are pretty expensive. They can be over $40,000 unless you get a really good discount, but they offer a lot, as you'll start to see as we go inside. You have a turn signal. You have blind spot monitoring. You even have this little light that displays when the vehicle is locked and you walk up to the door. The door panel, it opens wide. It has a lot of nice materials in it. They're going to age probably pretty well because after 3 years and 44,000 miles, mine looked exactly like you see it here today. Same thing with the seats. Honestly, there's a tiny bit of dirt, probably from my shoes, and that doesn't look any worse than how mine held up over 3 years. The pedals are great. You have a knee airbag. You have fuse box, hood release, all the options, ventilation, tilt telescoping wheel, trip reset, and then the StarTech seats, which do not get super hot in the summer and don't get super cold in the winter like leather might. They act more like cloth seats, but even though they don't breathe as well, they're still very, very comfortable. And you have a small sedan-sized sunroof up top. But when we hop inside of here, I'm going to fire it up and I'll show you the projector steering responsive headlights. And you can also see the basic heads-up display that gives you some information about your safety settings and safety features. But it's a leather-wrapped heated wheel. The heated option works pretty well. You have paddle shifters, voice and volume. You have adaptive cruise. The leather on this is fantastic. The stitching is really nice, and mine also held up really well. The screen, It gets better every single year. The software improves. You can control a lot of this stuff through the My Subaru app for your HVAC settings, but you do have a few physical buttons, and you can turn on the defrost on the front. You have your hazard button right there because you can't really see it under the tape. You have some storage, plugins, electronic parking brake. Not a very good backup camera, but it does the job. You also have X mode. I have a video of how I got stuck in mine in the snow and used deep snow and mud to get out of it. You have some cup holders. You have a center console. You can have a CD tray or a CD option put into some of these, specifically the touring trim levels, but you also have an upper tray right there, which is pretty neat. You have a sunglass holder. You have LED lighting, and I like that you just have to push the button. You can control the power moonroof, tilt, and slide it. You also have some LED lighting right here, and this actually slides all together. It doesn't just have an extension like a cheaper vehicle would. So overall, this is a really nice place to be, and honestly, I'm getting a little bit sentimental because I miss my Outback. But let's hop into the RAV4 and see what it has to offer. The RAV4 is certainly more meant for on-roads than off-road use like the Outback. You have a lot of black trim pieces on my SE. You also have this little piece of fake chrome, which does actually accent it pretty nice, and you have a lot of the same options throughout this vehicle. You have turn signal. You have blind spot monitoring, but you don't have the little fancy light that lights up to show you that it's excited and it wants to light up your path when you come near to the vehicle. But you still have the same proximity key features right there to get into your vehicle when it is locked. And I think that's probably part of the Subaru Toyota dynamic that they have as a company together. But the door panel, it's not as nice or as soft as the Outback, but it's probably going to age at least as well, if not better. It doesn't have as many different materials as some Subarus do, but they are more just black plastic materials that hold up pretty well. Nothing really down here to talk about. You have power options on the seat. It is heated. It's very comfortable, just like the Subaru seats. If I had to say one is more comfortable than the other, it would probably be the Outback, because I drove over 800 miles in a single day in the Outback, and my back was just fine. But driving a couple hours in this one, unless my hamstrings were just extra tight that day, this did not feel quite as comfortable. But on short trips, I love these seats. I do think that they do a good job until it's been long enough that your bum has been in the seat that it's time to get out and stretch. But otherwise, dashboard, you have a knee airbag, you have your controls, you have extra options on this one. You have a spot for your gum ventilation. Trip reset is over there, lighting stock. Everything is going to be very similar, just a little bit different in how this vehicle goes about it. And when we sit inside and we fire it up, the headlights are probably about as bright, but they are not steering responsive. The horn, high-pitched, it does the job. You can see a lot of cool information through here. You can control some of your safety features, look at your battery info. You can also do a lot through the screen. You can look at your energy flow up here. Otherwise, both of these vehicles have Android Auto, Apple CarPlay, so there's not really a whole lot to talk about. But the things you care about, they're all here. You have physical controls, although these are also software controlled, just like the Subaru, because you can turn it for forever. It doesn't have physical set points. You have heated seats, traction control, some plugins, some storage, more than the Outback. You have a backup camera. That's really not fantastic, but it does the job, and it's bigger than the Outbacks, taking up the whole horizontal focus of the screen. You have your trail modes right here compared to the Subaru that you have to access them through the screen. And you don't have as much room for a 40-ounce cup as you do on the Subaru. You can only fit one without the other one awkwardly hanging off. And that's because these walls are just a little bit too high, that I can't have this out here without it leaning against on the handle. And then you have just a single level storage tray for the center console. And you can actually hold quite a bit of random items in there, which is pretty cool. Otherwise, rear view mirror, sunglass holder, controls to tilt and to slide. You have LED lighting. It's a bigger light, but you have to push this tiny little button to access it. And then this is a cheaper sunshade. You have the extension versus the whole thing that can slide. And then you also have LED lighting on this one. But with that said, let's turn it off and we'll hop into the back of the Outback. I will say a couple things I really miss about the Outback is it is a better road trip car if you're going to pack it full of stuff. That extra foot of length is really handy because then you don't have to stack stuff so high that it blocks all the visibility on the back half of the vehicle like it does on the RAV4. But when you open the doors, that's another thing I miss about my Subaru, is that door, it might look decent on camera, but if you're getting car seats, big dog kennels in here, it's not gonna fit nearly as well as it does on the Subaru. Check this one out. It opens probably about 10 or 15 degrees more, which ultimately makes a big difference. But the door panel, it still looks like it was designed by the same people who designed the front. It looks really nice. Mine aged quite well. And even with the passenger seat further back than the driver's seat, we're gonna hop in here and you'll see there's a lot of room in the Outback. You have a few inches in front of my knees, at 5'11". I have a pamphlet or a phone holder, a couple map pockets, ventilation, heated seats, plugins, a really nice center armrest with some cup holders. It's sturdy. I have really good headroom, although not as good as I do have on the Toyota. And then I can also recline my seats a little bit. Oops, what am I doing? It's right here. So check that out. There's probably like at least 8 degrees of reclination that you can do, if that's a word. Anyways, let's hop out of this and into the Toyota. The back of this Toyota, under most circumstances, it's just fine. It's just when you have to get big items into it that I'm not as happy with it. But the door panel also looks like it was designed by the same people. There's not weird color schemes or various design language back here, like some weird vehicles do, where it's like the back door panel people didn't talk to the front. These are very uniform. And for how big of sellers these are, I'm not surprised. The back seats don't lay completely flat like the Subaru almost does, but you still have a lot of room down here. And if you have the hybrid, that's where the battery is. So please try not to block that off with your stuff, because it needs some airflow to make sure the battery isn't overheating. But back here, these seats also recline, but they sound a little bit more janky than they did on the Subaru. If you guys can hear some of that on camera still. But even with this seat a little bit further back than my driver's seat as well, I still have pretty similar room probably. I can recline and go a little bit further back. I have ventilation, but no heated seats because mine is not as high of a trim level. And then I have some cup holders. Overall, there is a little bit more headroom because you can see there's this cool cutout. Hopefully you can see like the shading right there where the sunroof would go into. And honestly, either of these vehicles would be fine to drive or ride in the back seat of, I think. My final thoughts of these vehicles is, well, I think they're both fantastic. There's a reason why I've owned each of them at a different time. I didn't sell the Outback because I think the RAV4 is a better vehicle, and I don't think that it's a worse vehicle either. I think they're just different. The Outback, even a non-wilderness, is more of an off-road focused wagon. The RAV4 is basically a Prius turned into small crossover SUV. They both have their market. They're both fantastic at what they're each used for. And I sold my Outback not because it was breaking down, not because something was wrong with it or that it was an obsolete vehicle, but because I just wanted to change. I drive a lot of Subarus. I've owned Toyota trucks in the past. I've never owned a Toyota front-wheel drive biased vehicle. I've only driven their platforms that are body on frame, and I wanted something different. But I think that both of these vehicles are great. I think you can't go wrong either way. I really miss my Outback every time I get into one of these just because they are such a good vehicle. These are one of the ultimate wagons you can buy, one of the last off-road wagons that you can have without modifying them or finding an old one. The RAV4s, they're not going anywhere. They're going to be around for a long time, so buy the vehicle that you like. Buy the one that you can afford without being stressed about it. Buy the one that's going to meet you and your family's needs. And for a lot of people, both of these do that. If you do adventure, you go to the trailheads, you can do all of that in a Toyota. But if you go a little bit further into the soft-roading trails, you might want to consider the Outback. Anyways, guys, I'm just rambling on. These are my thoughts, these are my opinions, and this is just one random person's perspective who happens to have a camera and got loose to make a YouTube video today. So if you guys get anything out of this video, please consider liking it. Comment your thoughts and opinions below. Subscribe if you haven't already, and check out the Twin Falls Subaru, one of the best Subaru dealerships in the nation. They sell below MSRP, they ship all over the country, and with that said, see you guys.